Welcome to another deep dive, and this time we're going exploring Creative Nation magazine, which is a South African publication.
Oh, really?
It's fantastic. It's like a celebration of the entire continent's creative scene.
Oh,
But you know what I'm really interested in?
what's that?
It's how they explore the mindset of creatives and artists, all those internal battles and triumphs that shape their journeys.
Yeah, I can see why you'd be drawn to that.
And so today, we're going to dive into an issue that tackles the relationship between determination and recognition.
Oh, interesting.
And
What's their take on that?
it's fascinating. They frame it as a paradox.
A paradox.
Yeah, they explore the allure and the potential pitfalls of seeking recognition.
Oh, wow. I see what you mean by a paradox.
It's a topic that pretty much anyone who's ever put their heart into something like a project can relate to, right?
Absolutely. That feeling of wondering if anyone will even notice or care.
Exactly. And,
Yeah.
just looking at the table of contents, some titles just pop out at you.
Like
The paradox of recognition and the gritty middle.
I see.
It's like they're speaking directly to that struggle of balancing the inner drive with the need for external validation.
Oh, for sure. It's a constant tug of war for many creatives.
So let's just jump right in.
That's good.
The first article is called The Paradox of Recognition, Friend or Foe on the Creative Journey.
Okay.
And they lay out both the exhilarating highs
Yeah.
and the potential traps
Yeah.
of seeking recognition.
That's intriguing. What do they say about the highs?
Well, they make this really compelling argument about how recognition can be like a double-edged sword,
Yeah, I can see that.
On the one hand, it can be so motivating.
Totally. It's a validation of your efforts, a boost to your confidence, and sometimes it opens doors to new opportunities.
Exactly. It's like that feeling of finally being seen and understood, which I
Right.
think is especially crucial in creative work, which can
Right.
be very solitary. And they bring this to life with some pretty powerful stories.
Oh, like what?
They introduce us to Maya Jones. She's a graphic designer
Okay.
who initially struggled with perfectionism, that fear of judgment that keeps you from putting your work out there.
Oh, I know it well.
And when she finally did start getting recognition,
Right.
it was like something just changed for her.
Like a switch flipped.
Exactly. It gave her that confidence to embrace imperfection, to experiment,
That's amazing.
and to develop a more authentic voice.
That's so powerful how recognition, when it's received in a healthy way,
Yeah.
can actually fuel creative growth.
And then there's the story of David Lee, a musician who got some really harsh criticism early on.
Oh, man.
Yeah, but instead of letting it derail him, he used it as fuel
Fuel for what?
to dig deeper into himself.
Yeah.
He realized the criticism pointed to a disconnect between who he really was musically and the sound he was trying to make.
Wow.
So he went on this period of intense introspection and experimentation, trying new instruments, different genres, and eventually he found his own unique sound, this fusion of soulful melodies and intricate rhythms, and it resonated with listeners.
That's so cool. It sounds like his success wasn't just about creating something different, but something true to himself.
And that's the key, right?
Yeah, I wonder if he would reach that level of authenticity without facing those rejections.
Good point. It's hard to say for sure, but his story definitely highlights the potential
Right.
for even negative feedback
Yeah.
to kickstart a journey of self-discovery and lead to a more successful and fulfilling creative path.
Right.
But the path to recognition, as they point out,
Yeah.
isn't always these inspiring tales.
I guess there's another side to this.
There's a flip side, a shadow side even, that can trap creatives.
Oh, okay. Like what?
Well, they talk about how constantly chasing recognition can lead to losing your authenticity. You start chasing trends, you mimic what's popular, and ultimately you create work that just feels hollow.
Yeah, I can see how that would happen.
And then the comparison trap comes in, right? Social media especially.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with these perfect images of success, and it makes us feel like we're not enough.
Yeah, it's hard to escape that feeling.
And we become addicted to those likes, shares, comments, and our self-worth gets tangled up with these numbers.
Yeah.
It can lead to creative paralysis.
Creative paralysis.
Yeah, like you're afraid to put anything out there that might not get praised or admired.
Wow, I see how that could happen. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. You don't take risks, so you don't grow.
Exactly. It stifles experimentation, and you end up with work that's just not original. And so this brings us to the core message they keep coming back to: self-awareness.
Self-awareness, that's a big one.
It is. And there's this great article called The Secret Weapon of Success: Unmasking Your Inner Decision Maker. Interesting title.
They say cultivating self-awareness is like having this internal compass. I love that analogy, an internal compass.
Right. It guides you through all the choppy waters of the creative process and life in general.
Yeah, it makes sense. Knowing yourself, your values, your goals, it can definitely guide you in the right direction.
And they break down how it impacts every part of the creative journey,
Okay.
from making decisions to building confidence,
Yeah.
managing relationships, and even coping with stress.
It's really all-encompassing, isn't it?
They even offer some practical tools.
Really? Like what? I'm always interested in actionable advice.
Well, they highlight journaling, but not just like writing about your day.
Right.
They have these specific prompts to help you uncover things like
What kind of things?
your core values, your deepest fears, and your aspirations.
That's really insightful.
One prompt, for example, is to think about a time you felt truly fulfilled by your work.
I like that.
What elements made you feel that way, and what values were being expressed?
That's deep. It forces you to really think about what matters most.
And the magazine also talks about how important it is to know your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, that self-assessment can be so valuable.
It helps you make better choices about projects and collaborations and the feedback you need. They even suggest making a strengths and weaknesses inventory.
Interesting. Like a list.
Yeah, one side is all the skills and talents that you excel at, and on the other side, you list the things you struggle with.
I can see how that would be useful. You can play to your strengths and work on your weaknesses.
Right. And delegate tasks that drain you, find people who complement your weaknesses, and focus your energy on where you shine. It's like they're giving you a blueprint for a more fulfilling creative practice.
Exactly. It all goes back to that internal compass.
And they bring this to life with the story of Aliyah Hassan, a filmmaker who was initially overwhelmed by how vast the film industry is. She didn't know where to focus her energy or how to stand out.
I can imagine it's a competitive field.
But she took the magazine's advice and started journaling, reflecting on her experiences, her passions, and values.
And what happened?
She realized her greatest strength wasn't just her storytelling, it was her organization skills and her attention to detail.
I see.
So she decided to focus on documentaries.
Documentaries.
Yeah. It aligned with her talents and she could really use her strengths. It's a great example of how self-awareness is about taking action and aligning your work with who you are.
That's a really powerful point. It's not just about introspection. It's about using that knowledge to make decisions.
And it also touches on finding your niche.
Finding your niche.
Yeah. In a world that often rewards being a generalist, the magazine says to specialize, to become known for something specific.
So it's like Aliyah found her niche in documentaries, but that doesn't limit her, right?
Right. She can still use her storytelling and organizational skills in other projects. Maybe even branch out into producing or directing other types of films. It's about leveraging those core strengths across different platforms.
I see. It's about finding that core and then seeing how it can be applied in different ways.
Exactly. And this brings us to another aspect of the creative journey that's often overlooked.
What's that?
The gritty middle.
The gritty middle, huh? That's a good way to put it.
It is, right. It's that phase where doubt starts creeping in, you lose motivation, and you just question everything.
Oh, I know that feeling all too well.
And Creative Nation, they have this article. It's called The Gritty Middle, When Doubt Meets Determination.
I bet a lot of people will resonate with that.
It's the one I think most listeners will be nodding along to.
Yeah.
Because, let's be honest, no creative journey is just a straight line to success.
It's definitely not a smooth ride. Lots of bumps along the way.
Exactly. There are bumps, detours, and sometimes it feels like you're just slogging through mud to move forward.
It's true. And doesn't magazine offer any advice for getting through that?
They do. And they don't sugarcoat it either. They call it facing the monsters under the bed. You know, those fears and insecurities that can really paralyze us.
Oh, yeah. Those monsters can be tough to deal with.
But the good thing is, they offer actual tools, not just empty platitudes.
Okay, I'm all ears. What kind of tools are we talking about?
Yeah?
Because I think a lot of people just give up at this stage.
Yeah, they assume they're not cut out for it.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the secret?
Well, one of the most powerful tools is journaling, but they take it a step further.
How so?
They have specific prompts to help you figure out what's at the root of your creative blocks.
Well, that's interesting. Like what kind of prompts?
One example is, what's the absolute worst that could happen if you share your work?
That's a good one. I can see how that would be helpful.
It makes you confront those deep-seated fears that are holding you back.
Yeah, sometimes we don't even realize what those fears are until we really dig deep.
Exactly. And to illustrate this, they share the story of Sarah Miller. She's a sculptor. And she was ready to just give up after a bunch of unsuccessful exhibitions.
Oh man, I can relate to that feeling of rejection. It can be brutal.
Her work wasn't selling, and she started to lose her confidence. She was convinced she wasn't good enough.
It's easy to fall into that trap, especially when you're putting yourself out there.
But instead of giving up completely, she tried journaling, using those prompts from the magazine.
Oh wow. And what did she discover?
Well, she realized that she was afraid of being vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
Yeah. She was holding back, creating technically good work, but it lacked emotional depth.
So it's not that her work was bad, it's just that it wasn't truly her.
Exactly. And I think we can all relate to that, right? Putting on a front and being afraid to let people see the real us.
Definitely. We build up these walls to protect ourselves.
But Sarah's story shows us that vulnerability isn't weakness. It's actually the key to connecting with people.
It's about being authentic.
When she started putting her own experiences, her struggles, her fears into her sculptures, her work took on this whole new dimension.
And how do people respond?
People responded to the rawness, the honesty, the emotion that was now in her art.
That's amazing. And I bet that was incredibly liberating for her as well.
Oh, absolutely. She found her voice, not just as an artist, but as a person. And the magazine emphasizes this idea that the creative journey is ultimately a journey of self-discovery.
That's a great way to look at it. It's about exploring yourself and expressing that through your work.
And it's not always pretty, it's not always Instagram worthy,
Right.
but it's real, it's authentic, and that's what connects.
I totally agree. Do they have any other examples of this in the article?
Yeah, they talk about David Chen, a writer who was terrified of sharing his work.
Oh, wow. I know that feeling.
He wanted to write a bestseller, but he was so afraid of failing.
I think a lot of writers experience that as like imposter syndrome, especially with social media constantly showing these overnight success stories.
Right. But David, instead of giving up, decided to change his approach.
What did he do?
He stopped trying to write what he thought would sell and started writing what was true to him.
Writing from the heart.
Exactly. He wrote essays about loss, grief, love, all those complex human experiences.
That's brave.
And he discovered that vulnerability, not perfection, was what resonated with people.
It's so true. We often strive for perfection, but it's the imperfections that make us human and relatable.
And David, you know where he found his community, his support system?
Where?
Online writing groups.
Really? Online?
He started sharing his work in these groups and got encouragement and feedback from other writers.
That's amazing. It's like technology, which can sometimes feel so isolating, can also be a source of connection.
Right. And it highlights how important community is for creative people.
Definitely. It's about having that support system, that sense of belonging.
And the magazine dives deeper into this in their article called Support Systems for the Determined Creative.
Support systems for the determined creative. That sounds interesting. What do they say about it?
They go beyond that image of the lone artist and acknowledge that we all need support, especially when things get tough.
We're not meant to do it alone.
They argue that a network of fellow creatives offers encouragement, feedback, and a sense of belonging.
It's like having your own tribe.
Exactly. And they give some cool examples of creative communities.
Like what?
Like the Studio in Brooklyn, New York. It's this collective of visual artists from all different backgrounds.
I've heard of them.
Yeah.
They're known for their amazing energy and the support they give to new artists.
It's like a creative incubator.
A creative incubator. That's a great way to describe it. What other communities do they mention?
There's Scribbler's Haven. It's online for writers, and they offer writing prompts, critique forums, and even mentoring.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Writing can be such a solitary endeavor, so having that kind of support can make a huge difference.
And then there's Soundweavers, which connects musicians from all over the world.
Wow, so cool. It's like breaking down those geographical barriers and creating a global community of musicians.
Exactly. And for those who don't have access to these existing communities, they give advice on how to build your own.
Oh, that's helpful. What do they suggest?
They say to look for local opportunities like workshops or meetup groups, or you can even start your own gatherings.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And I bet online platforms can be really useful for connecting with like-minded people.
Absolutely. And this is where self-awareness comes in again.
How so?
By understanding your own needs and what you want out of community, you can find groups that really fit you.
Makes sense. You don't want to just join any group. You want one that aligns with your values and goals.
Exactly. And they remind us that building a community is a two-way street. It's about giving support as much as receiving it.
Right. It's about collaboration, encouragement, and being there for each other.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together. And this idea of supporting each other becomes even more important when we start talking about the challenges that a lot of creative people face, especially those from marginalized communities. And this leads us to a topic that the magazine tackles head-on: bridging the digital divide, empowering young minds in a connected age. This is where the conversation really shifts gears, you know?
Yeah.
It goes from those personal journeys we were talking about
Mhm.
to a much broader societal issue
Right.
that affects access to creativity itself.
I see.
This article was a real eye-opener.
In what way?
Well, in our digital world, technology and internet access are basically essential
Right.
for education, for careers, for creative expression even. But as they point out, there's
Yeah.
this huge chunk of South African youth who are being left behind.
Creating a digital divide.
Exactly. And it has serious consequences.
Like what?
Limited education, fewer job opportunities,
Yeah.
and even a stifling of creativity.
It's like they're being shut out of the conversation entirely.
That's a good way to put it. And the magazine highlights how this just makes existing inequalities even worse.
Makes sense.
Mhm.
It disproportionately impacts communities that are already facing so many barriers.
But the magazine also highlights the resilience of these young South African creatives.
Oh, that's good.
They talk about people who are finding ways to overcome these obstacles.
Can you give an example?
Yeah, they profiled this young entrepreneur
Okay.
who created a mobile art school.
A mobile art school. That's cool.
Yeah, he travels to these remote villages
Wow.
with a van full of laptops and art supplies
That's amazing.
and offers free digital art workshops.
What a great way to reach those who wouldn't otherwise have access.
It's so inspiring, right?
It is.
But they make it clear it's not just about individual efforts. It's
Yeah.
about collective action, systemic change.
Mhm.
They call for more investment in digital infrastructure,
Right.
especially in those under-resourced communities.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And policies that promote affordable internet access for everyone.
So it's about leveling the playing field in a way.
And that brings us to another systemic issue they explore: unequal access to good education.
Education, yeah, that's key.
They have this article called Unequal Education: Leveling the Playing Field for a Creative Nation. It goes beyond just the digital divide
I see.
and looks at the root causes of educational inequity.
It sounds like a deep dive into the education system.
It is, and it's not always pretty.
In what way?
They talk about these huge resource disparities between schools,
Right, yeah.
especially between those in rural areas
Yeah.
and those in wealthier areas.
So like a lack of textbooks and qualified teachers.
Exactly, and even basic infrastructure.
Wow. That creates a huge disadvantage for students.
And it makes it so hard to break that cycle, you know?
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Students who are already facing so many challenges are further disadvantaged by a system that's not giving them what they need.
It's like a domino effect.
And of course, this affects their ability to nurture their creative potential.
Makes sense. But what about the students? Do they offer any advice for those who are in these situations?
They do. They encourage them to really embrace self-learning.
Self-learning.
Yeah. Using online resources like websites, YouTube channels, online courses,
Oh, that's a good idea.
things like that. They also talk about the value of study groups.
Yeah, that peer support can be so helpful.
Right. It's about finding ways to supplement their education and really take charge of their own learning.
Taking ownership even when the system is failing them.
Exactly. But they stress that it's not just about individual responsibility.
Yeah.
They say we need systemic change, more government funding, fairer distribution of resources, and policies that ensure every child has access to good education.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
And this focus on equity, on giving everyone a chance,
Yeah.
leads us to the last article we're going to talk about today. Seeking Divine Recognition, a Biblical Perspective.
Seeking Divine Recognition. That's an interesting title.
It is, right. And it looks at recognition from a completely different angle.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How so?
Well, in a world that's obsessed with things like likes and followers, this article makes us rethink where we look for validation.
I see. So it's about finding recognition from within rather than external sources.
Exactly. They use biblical teachings to argue that true recognition, spiritually speaking, comes from God, not from the praise of people.
So it's about aligning yourself with a higher purpose.
And they're not saying we should reject earthly achievements
Right.
or dismiss recognition from others. It's more about shifting our focus.
Shifting our focus.
Yeah, recognizing that true fulfillment comes from a life of purpose, integrity, and service to something bigger than ourselves.
I like that. It's a very different way of looking at success.
And they give some suggestions for cultivating this divine recognition.
Well, like what?
Things like prayer, reading scripture, and helping others.
Those are all practices that connect us to something beyond ourselves.
Right. And it's like they're saying that when we find our validation from within, we're not so easily swayed by what other people think.
We're more grounded, more rooted in our own values.
Exactly. So to wrap up this deep dive into Creative Nation magazine,
Yeah.
what do you think is the biggest takeaway?
For me, it's that emphasis on self-awareness. It's the key to navigating the creative journey and life, really.
Well said. It's like they've given us the tools not just to succeed as creatives,
Right.
but to thrive as human beings.
That's a great way to put it.
So for our listeners out there, think about where you find true recognition in your own lives. What helps you connect with that inner compass? Those are questions worth exploring. So until next time, keep seeking, keep creating, and keep diving deep.